Hello and welcome to another clearing episode all about just missing out on your required grades.
Yeah, like I went through it and I didn't get the grades for my first choice or insurance. Shock, biggest shock of my life. But, I ended up going to a really good uni and had the best 3 years of my life. So, it all worked out for the best, really. So I went to St. Michael's Catholic Grammar School, which is based in North Finchley, and I did English literature, politics, and French. So that was in my year 13. I dropped German in going from year 12 to year 13. All three subjects that I really, really enjoyed, and predicted grades. I was predicted what I needed to be predicted to get into my uni choices. So I was predicted AAB. And then to get into Queen Mary, which was my first choice, which is based in London, you needed to get, it was AAB, yeah. And then my insurance choice was Essex, Colchester campus, and that was ABB. So obviously results day came, I was like, confident. I was like, yeah, I've done everything I can. Like I studied really hard to make sure, I felt confident going into my exam, what most students will do. Results day came. I woke up in the morning, and obviously before you get your results, you can log on to UCAS.
Yeah.
So I logged on to UCAS and it was just like, no offers basically, like no confirmations. Wasn't too sure what was going to happen next. And I was quite anxious to find out like my actual grades of what I'd gotten. It could have been like I totally failed, or I could be 1 mark off here, 1 mark off there. So I actually got ABC, which is not bad grades. Like B was 1 mark off an A and my C was 1 mark off a B. So obviously I was like even more distraught because I was like, really? Couldn't give me just the one mark? I just cried and cried and cried and cried and cried. So I left and I came home, and that's kind of when the whole process kind of started. So it's definitely a big shock because, I thought I did everything that I needed to do to at least get ABB.
Everyone always obviously associates clearing with the grade situation. It's definitely not the end of the world. Like, it obviously feels like it when you do that, because your teachers put a lot of pressure on you, you put a lot of pressure on yourself. I mean, I didn't get my grades. I proper flopped, like really bad, and I was so upset. And it's just in that moment you just think this is the end, like where do I go from here?
100%.
But then obviously things all work out okay. Did you do next? Did you to UCAS and see who had your course in clearing?
Yeah.
Have an idea who you wanted to speak to?
No, I actually didn't have an idea because obviously I had my heart set on Queen Mary and then Essex as a backup. So I looked at the league table for politics and I just thought, okay, what unis do I like the sound of? And I kind of just went through it, and I think I started to call through the top 20. It was a lot of phone calls, and a lot of them were like, no, if you don't have a certain grade, like, sorry, we can't give you a place on the course. I think it was like 4 p.m. maybe. I still don't have an offer. I'm calling, I'm waiting for people to call me back. I'm, getting rejected all over again. I was just like, what is going on? I called Kent University, told them what happened. They asked me a few questions like, what grade did you get in politics? What were the other 2 that you studied? And then right there and then they offered me a place. So that was a bit of a relief, but obviously I hadn't prepared to go to uni away from London. So I live in Hertfordshire, so I don't live in London, but I was prepared to commute into London to go to university. Suddenly, I'm moving to Kent for 3 years. I was like, okay, this was not the plan. We booked one of the open days, had to go and see the uni, make sure I liked it, make sure I was happy, apply for accommodation, apply for student loan, because obviously that now changed. It was a panic. And up until the point where Kent offered me a place, there was a time, I think it was around 2:00, and I was like, it's not happening. And then a couple of hours later, I had a university place. For most people that I've spoken to that have gone through clearing, it's been frustrating, but then there's always light at the end of the tunnel. And a lot of them, you talk to them now and they're like, I actually am so happy that it happened this way, as opposed to the original way that I had intended for it to go. So yeah.
Yeah. So is that how you feel? Are you obviously very happy about how it went?
Yeah, I'm happy with Kent. I went there, I made some really good friends. The course was amazing, had some really good lecturers, and I got the chance to experience life away from home. So I always encourage people when I'm speaking to them that if you have the chance, not necessarily saying move thousands of miles away from your family home, but try and get an experience that doesn't mean that you're living at home, because it does help in terms of your personal growth. And you don't have that fear of missing out, especially when Freshers Week is going on and people are meeting up and staying over at people's houses and things like that. So it's something that you don't get when you're commuting. So yeah, I don't regret it. And not to mention Canterbury's a beautiful area. So it was quite nice to be away from like the hustle and bustle of London, which is what it would have been if I'd gone to Queen Mary. If you wake up in the morning and you see that you haven't been accepted, to know what you need to do next in a logical way. And I think the more prepared you are for something, the easier it is to deal with it. My panic and stress came from the fact that I actually didn't know what to do. It was like, do I call unis? Do they call me? Do I submit another application? Do I defer? Do I wait 6 months? Like, what do I actually do? If I'd had the chance to write down unis that I could call or that I wanted to call, I could have come home and just been on the phone straight away. Instead, I had to read up about clearing. I had to understand clearing. I had to understand UCAS points. I had to calculate my own UCAS points. Like, there's all these things that you have to do because you get those questions. So if I'd had enough information, I wouldn't have been so stressed out and I wouldn't have been so panicked. It would have been like, okay, cool. Right, you haven't got the grades. That's upsetting, yes. But here's what we need to do next. And I can deal with it in a logical way. Not to say that like you should be mentally prepared for clearing because you're going to go through it, but the better understanding you have of it is better, because I didn't have an understanding of it because I went through it but didn't have any idea what it was until I went through it. So
not really talk about it too much. Was it quite unpleasant?
People don't want to necessarily fill your mind with negativity around your grades. Which is what clearing kind of connotes, but I don't necessarily think it's a negative thing, because obviously some people actually choose to go through clearing, where they get better grades than what they were predicted, and then they decide, actually I want to go to a better uni. People change their mind about whether they want to live at home or live away, so they go through clearing, and then some people don't get the grades, but it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Sorry, I think I already knew the grades were quite out of my reach, because I did maths, biology, German and economics. Big regret, all of those. Ended up picking all the really hard ones, which is a bit silly. To get into Surrey for events management, I needed 2 A's and a B. My second choice was Hertfordshire, which I got conditional for. I actually got CDD, so it's a good job that I had an unconditional, but I was really upset still. I was really stressed. I had my heart set on my first choice. I knew that I hadn't done very well. I woke up and I had a text from Hertfordshire saying congrats, you're in. And so just that realisation straight away that I hadn't got my grades for my first choice, that was instantly just like so like distressed.
A lot of people on results day, it's like your grades kind of define you. Which is how I felt, because I was like, oh, maybe I'm not that smart, or maybe I'm picking a course that's like too hard for me, and maybe I should pick something a bit easier, or you know, maybe it's just not for me, and you start to doubt yourself. Like, failure is a journey, and there's a start and there's a finish. And the start is the grades and not getting your offer, and the finish is going to a university and studying a course that you may have not thought you wanted to study in the first place, because some people do have to change their choices. But there's always a way, and it just might take, it's not as linear. Your journey might just be a bit more squiggly, but you'll get to where you want to get to. It's important that you go to university and study something that you enjoy, or have an interest in. Otherwise, it makes those 3 years very, very hard. I think what's different about this particular year in terms of results day is obviously that grades have been determined by other factors other than exam. I think it's important that we touch on that point, because I think the clearing process in general, it's not a very nice process to go to. However, you know, you always come out the best. But I think for people this year, it is very upsetting that systematically it's just against them. You know, people have been downgraded, and I've seen stories of people predicted 3A stars to come out with 3 Cs. Like, how is that even possible? It does not define them, and this is not their fault. Number one is, you know, how you present yourself. Number two is how you pitch yourself. Number three is how you are as an individual. I haven't been asked to prove what I got at A level. I haven't been asked to explain why I got a certain grade. So it is a shame, but I think what I would say to a lot of people, if they are going through that process, is to appeal their grades, number one, but also remember that there are different ways in which you can deal with this situation. So whether it is to defer and, you know, go again next year, or whether it is to do a course that's a foundation year at that university that you want to go to then be able to transfer onto the course. Yes, it's an extra year. Yes, it's frustrating, but there's that option. There's also the option to transfer unis after your first year. So look into those options as well. Don't feel like you need to settle for a different university based on the fact that your grades have been awarded to you without, you know, reflecting your merit and your hard work. But be aware of what clearing is and how it works. Be aware of, if you change your mind, you don't necessarily have to stick to that choice, but also if you don't get the grades, that, you know, it's kind of just another opportunity to reassess where you're going. You said you had Surrey, but then you went to Hertfordshire. I'm going to assume you had a good time in Hertfordshire, right? Like, you know.
I absolutely love it. I'm
exactly.
that I went there. Yeah.
So it always kind of works out in a very strange way. And I think everyone you talk to, they're just like, I actually really liked the uni I went to.
I'd like to say thank you to Dami for sharing her experience, and I hope you found it useful.